So our final speaker is a local person, Marcin, who is going to tell us about ab initio electronic and scattering properties of the sodium lithium molecule in the triplet state. So Marcin, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very happy that I can present you results of our studies. The title of my presentation you can see on the slide. I have underlined ab initio, which means that we are trying to reproduce some properties of sodium-lithium molecule in the triplet state using just fundamental theories. It means that we do not use any scaling, we do not have any empirical contribution, it's just based from the first principles. So, and when we talk about sodium-lithium molecule, I have to underline that many research works have been performed. More or less 10 years ago, the potential energy curve for the ground state was obtained from spectroscopic measurements. But in this talk, I would like to focus on the triplet state, which has very shallow potential energy curve. But nevertheless, when we have the collision between sodium and lithium atoms, this case seems to be very interesting. More recently, the molecule, this one, in the triplet state, was used in the experiment in the collision with another sodium atom, and nice Feshbach resonances have been observed. The measurement was done in a Ketterle group, and for this work we have provided potential energy surface to explain at least part of the resonances. Anyway, in this talk I would like to focus only on the diatomic molecules, and the crucial parameter here is the scattering length. And I would like to start from the slide, which is rather like a very basic slide. What is the scattering length? In principle, when we have the collision between two atoms, and they can scatter, and when we assume that our potential energy curve, at least long-range part, is dominated by C6, with some approximation we can get this nice equation obtained several years ago in this seminal paper. And here we have two contributions. The first contribution is sensitive only to the C6 parameter, and the second contribution, namely, which contains also phase shift, is sensitive to whole shape of potential energy curve. So to give you a little bit of the intuition how the scattering length is sensitive to depth of the potential and the C6 parameter, I assume such very simple potential, what we have only just two parameters, and then we scale the C6, either C6, and then we have on this plot scattering length in the function of the scaling of the C6, or we scale the depth of the potential, and we have all those parts. And what we see here, we have some kind of a discontinuity. This is nearly minus infinity, there is a nearly plus infinity, and this is the situation when the potential is able to support one more band state, which is formally described by this equation. So what we see generally, the scattering lengths are less sensitive to the C6 factor than to the depth of the potential. So the question is how to obtain the potential. And the approach what we are using, we represent our potential as a sum of several contributions. The first one is the Hartree-Fock energy, or in other words, mean field approach. Then we have to include the correlation energy, and the crucial component is obtained with couplet clusters, with single, doubles, and also some of the triple excitation. If you are more familiar with configuration interaction description, it means that we include also most of the quadruple excitations. But usually this is not enough, and our expansion has to be longer. We should include also higher excitations, sometimes even like a more, which you see by these three dots here. And then after that, probably we need also the relativistic contribution, and also we need maybe go even further by including quantum electrodynamics contribution and of course, we need to go beyond Born-Oppenheimer approximation. So it means that we need at least adiabatic contribution also. So, and how the potential looks like. Here you see more or less the potential obtained by our computations. We also present some kind of results what we have obtained with lower quality methods, as you can see, at least for this van der Waals type interaction, including everything is sort of a crucial. And here on the right part of the slide, you see a particular contribution in the function of the interatomic distance. And here we have the relativistic contribution, which seems to be an order of about 2 reciprocal centimeters, which is sort of a, which maybe seems as a small value in comparison to the depth of the potential, but still we need to include them. Of course, we have also higher excitations contribution. And as you may see here in this particular case, both contribution has similar amplitude and different signs. So it means that they may cancel out a little bit. But then we have the family of other contributions, which are more or less 1 order of magnitude smaller. And this is mostly quantum electrodynamics effect, adiabatic, and most of the higher excitations. So when we use our potential and we try to obtain the scattering length, which is in this column, we see that inclusion of the higher excitation can change a lot the scattering length. This is more or less what we have expected from the beginning, that these relatively small changes in the depth of the well can change significantly the scattering length. Of course, when we include the relativistic, the change is very huge. And then we have other contributions as well. And this is the results what we have published a few years ago. But with time, the question appeared, what about non-adiabatic effect? If they are important or not. So, and to understand this, we have to return to this basic slide in which we have molecule, and the crucial player here is the reduced mass. And what we are using in our calculation, we use atomic masses. So it means that we assume that the electrons perfectly follow the movement of nuclei. But this is not necessarily true. In more formal language, it means that we are using a Schrödinger equation, which contains in principle the electronic and nuclear degree of freedom, and we need to make the separation between these 2 types of movement. So when we do this, after like quite heavy, let's say, analysis, we can get something what is called effective Hamiltonian for atoms. And this effective Hamiltonian for atoms contains several terms. I have to underline that 3 of them describe the non-adiabatic contribution. In first approximation, we can neglect the contribution to the potential, which should be the smallest one, and as far as our molecule, as our state is well separated from all other states, it means that we do not have some intersystem crossing. This contribution is really small. So we can neglect this part. We have also remembered that we are in the ultracold regime where scattering is fully characterized by S-wave. So we can also forget about this component. And finally, we have only one contribution, something what we call vibrational G factor. And few words about them. The vibrational G factor is a sum of 2 components. One, what we call nuclear G factor, this one. And if we assume that our G factor is just the same like a nuclear G factor, it means that we assume that we use nuclear masses instead of atomic masses. And then we have the second contribution, which is the electronic contribution. And this contribution contains the coupling between all other electronic states. And using this equation and the response theory, we can obtain the G factor, and you see more or less how it's behave on this curve. What you can expect in the long range part, it reaches kind of a constant value, and it simplifies a lot the calculation in practice. But because our calculation for the G factor are not as precise as for the potential energy curve, so we would like to study a little bit how our results, how the scattering length is sensitive to the change in the G factor. And to do this, we scale the shape of the curve by two parameters. One is just the shift, the shift of the asymptotic value, and the second scales the amplitude of the changes of the G factor. This green dot here represents the position in which we do not include any non-adiabatic effect in our calculation for the scatterings, and here we have more or less the change in the amplitude, which is mostly important for the short range part. And as you see here, the scattering length is not very sensitive. All those lines are more or less horizontal. This is not very surprising because the nuclear wave function, at least for S wave, has small amplitude for the short range. But when we shift the asymptotic value, we can change the scattering length by significant amount. It's usually few bars. And when we do this exactly with the shape of G factor, what we have obtained, we see that the difference between the adiabatic and non-adiabatic results is in the order of 1 bar. So just as an information, as a take-home message from this talk, it means that the non-adiabatic effects are small. This is more or less what we can expect. But nevertheless, with the high precision of measurement or increasing precision of the measurement, we are, let's say, in the region in which we are very close to the experimental resolution. Thank you very much for your attention. And this is the moment to say also thank you to all funding agencies. And you see nice photos of 2 clusters which we are using. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this talk. Time for questions. One right at the back, keeping Mikhail fit.
I'm sorry if I missed it, but how did you estimate the uncertainties of the scattering lengths?
Sorry?
Uncertainties of the scattering lengths.
Okay. I'm returning here, more or less. Yeah, our potential is the sum of these several components, and we use certain basis set in each of the during the calculation of each of the components. And then usually we are not able to reach the complete basis set, so we have final size of our basis set. And this difference between the calculation in the highest possible basis set and the estimated complete basis set limit gives us the information about the uncertainty of each of the component. And then we have to propagate this uncertainty through the nuclear Schrödinger equation during the solving somehow. And this gives us the information about uncertainty of the calculations.
Yes, question here.
You extrapolate to the full basis sets, or
Yes.
how do you know what is it if you don't calculate it? You know.
What do you mean?
So all of these potential terms, you said that you estimate uncertainty as a difference between the full basis set and the one that you used.
Yeah, I mean full means because in electronic structure calculation we are not able to use complete basis set anyway. So it means that we have to cut our basis set at a certain moment.
Sure, sure.
Usually we are trying to reach as big as possible. This is obvious. And usually when we increase the size of the basis set, we know how it should behave roughly with the increasing basis set. So it's usually like a basis set number, which is
so for each of those terms, you calculated multiple basis sets, and then you like extrapolate.
Exactly.
Okay.
and there are, you know, complete the equations how it should behave with the basis set are more or less none, so we can use, let's say, right equations.
So I was wondering, for this non-adiabatic stuff that you were showing at the end, you're saying, okay, it's 1 over mu for 1 over mu squared scaling.
Okay.
Does this mean it's actually less important for the heavier ones? If you like it, no, I mean the magnitude of these terms becomes smaller, but also the sensitivity of the scattering length to these.
Yeah, in principle, it should be that for heavier elements, it should be less sensitive. But in the same time, please remember that this is proportionality, and the proportionality factors contains also the, like, where it is? No, back. Yeah, in this equation, you have the components which contains the electronic contribution. And as you see here at the bottom, you have the difference between the electronic state, which is interesting for you, and all some other state. And in the case of the heavy molecule, usually you have the denser, bigger density of the state, and not necessarily when you, in practice, it may be also important. Yes, so this is like two different trends in practice. But when you choose particular molecule and you just change the mass, then you may assume that it should be less important.
I think that you are right, Thijs, that like because the correction is getting smaller, but relative sensitivity is higher. So I think at the end we didn't check really like how the interplay of these two, right? Assuming that for heavy molecules anyway we don't know anything. So.
Right, I think we're perfectly on time, so let's bring the session to a close and thank all of the speakers